Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in another study of Spiritism connection with transpersonal psychology, which bring together the teaching of Allan Kardec and Joanna de Angelis. I am Fabrício Assunção from the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth in England. We welcome our speakers, Dr. Guadalupe Amaral and Tiago Risotto, from the Brazilian Spiritist Medical Association, who will talk to us tonight on the theme Reincarnation, Commitments, and Emotional Relationships. This theme refers to parts 2 and 4 of the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, dealing with sympathies and antipathies, relative happiness and unhappiness, disappointments and ungratefulness, and broken affection. Now, a few words of introduction about our two speakers. Guadalupe is a medical doctor and a Jungian analyst. She is an author and a speaker on the psychological series of Joanna de Angelis with the Brazilian Spiritist Medical Association and the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. Amongst her many qualifications, Guadalupe has postgraduate degree in health, spirituality, and Jungian clinical psychology. She is a member of the International Association for Analytical Psychology, the Department of Analytical Psychology and Spirituality at the Brazilian Jung Association, and the Spirituality Group at the Jung Institute of the Rio Grande do Sul. Tiago is a researcher and a member of the Psychology and Spiritist Group at the Department of Mental Health of the Brazilian Spiritist Medical Association. He is a graduate from the University of Brasilia. He holds a specialization in analytical psychology from the Jung Institute of Brasilia. He is a specialist in forensic psychology and has worked for many years with the juvenile offenders in the social educational system of the Federal District in Brazil. Our speakers will give their talk in Portuguese, so we are pleased to welcome Dr. Dana Sissi, who will be giving us simultaneous translation into English. Dan has a doctorate in education. He is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute in the United States. He's an author and gives many public talks on spirituality and spiritism internationally. So now I hand it over to Guadalupe, Tiago, and Dan for tonight's topic, reincarnation, commitments, and emotional relationship. Over to you.
Ok, olá amigos, olá amigas, é um prazer estar
Hello,
aqui
friends.
contigo, que a gente possa ter uma noite
May we have a
especial,
special evening
tratando de um
talking
tema
about a sensitive
e estruturante na
topic
vida humana,
and a very important one
dos
that
humanos,
is relationships,
importantíssimos.
very important for the journey of the spirit.
Guadalupe, umas palavrinhas
And I invite
iniciais.
Guadalupe for some initial words.
Olá, pessoal.
Hello, everyone.
Como o Thiago
It
já
is
traz,
a pleasure
estar
to
com
be here with you,
vocês, trazendo pouco do nosso
sharing a
conhecimento
bit
e,
of
acima
our
de tudo, da nossa
experience with you,
vivência, de como nós também nos colocamos
as
nesse
how we
estágio,
also
em
see
trajetória,
reincarnation
a respeito realmente de algo que é
in regards to this
primordial
important topic
na vida do ser espiritual que
that
somos.
is really key for us.
Que seja uma hora e meia.
So I hope that's an hour and a half that may be very productive, very inspiring,
Nós, e é com muita gratidão
and
que
we're
nós
very
estamos
happy to
aqui
be
com
here with you.
vocês.
Muito bem, amigos, tema de hoje é sintetizado.
The topic today is called
e relacionamento
reincarnation, relationships, and emotional and affective connections.
Psicologicamente, as ciências psicológicas
Psychological sciences
que nós organizamos
have
nossa
already learned
subjetividade
that we gather our
a
subjectivity as how we relate to others, and that's very important for our psychological life.
como espíritas e agregando uma
As a spiritist and adding a transpersonal perspective, we also understand that reincarnation as a law of life
sobre a compreensão de como os
adds a
nossos
perspective
objetivos
as to how our relationships and our emotional connections transcend an existence. In truth,
na verdade,
they reach a multiplicity of possibilities in which we reconnect in different families, we meet adversaries again, we rendezvous with loved ones in this journey of the soul through the countless journeys of the spirit. So when we chose this topic, we knew that independent of the culture in which we live it today, this is a very important topic and a very challenging one. So as we talk about memory, emotions, and how they impact our souls through relationships, we have to think that every experience and every emotional expression of a experience will be recorded in the spirit. And we take these experiences life after life. So if today, if academically the psychodynamic schools teach us a lot about the unconscious as a locus for the psyche where all these experiences are united, these contents, these experiences are the result of many different lifetimes. So we need to understand that every time that we reincarnate, everything that we live through is recorded on our soul. If today we live a personality in a different culture, in a different family, in a new cultural composition or environment, everything that we have lived continues to act on our psyche, pushing us forward as spirits in this field of possibilities of everything that we have lived, whether it's positively or negatively. In short, we are heirs of ourselves. That which we were 1,000 years ago can still today influence our psychic field. That which we suffered in past incarnations can still be open in the field of wounds that we carry, that we cultivate in terms of virtue over multiple lifetimes in the field of ethics, will remain as possibilities that may trigger behaviors in a new life. So my initial words are for us to reflect on how memory and rememberings remain in the spirit even after our reincarnation. But I want to pass to Guadalupe to say a little bit as well. It's a topic that has many different dimensions. And it's interesting in this first part of our conversation that our growth, our self-growth, as Jung would say, individuation, is to become that which already are in potential, takes place through relationships. So everything in world is in a relationship. Me with myself, with me with my friends, with people who come across my way, me with nature, and so forth. From there on, it's important for us to understand that we are born, reborn in the places that we need, exactly to develop that which we need in that moment for our spiritual journey. So much so that even if we do not understand, we are in a family that we need to, with the privileges and challenges that we asked for or we received according to our own free will and needs, to make the best possible use of this time that we have while incarnate on earth. Such is the case that we are heirs of ourselves, as Tiago mentioned, and we have this deotropism that propels us towards the Creator. And we can say something about this idea of being created in the image of God and our desire to feel divine love that already is in its plenitude. So let's go back to the moment that we're in. All of this is very complex and at the same time very perfect within the whole of creation. But the truth is that the moment we have to act, to transform, to signify, and to relate to each other is now, is today, the moment we find ourselves in. So, Tiago, the first reflection that I would bring from a more global perspective is this idea that each one of us will have our challenges, our privileges, our easiness, but the transformative moment is the present. And to say that the transformative moment is the present means that whatever it is that we are, we may enjoy this work of creation of which we are part of. So that which we call challenges can be reframed as opportunities. If we have that touches our heart, also help us to move forward. And I bring this forward to our reflection. We need to, sometimes we have this idea, we need to understand that there are no great missions or our mistakes in the past that will really count. What counts is what we make of all that we are and will be. And that is what Jesus asks of us and what the spirituality asks of us, for us to make of every moment a hymn of gratitude and responsibility toward life. And Tiago, this is when I pass it back to you, but I remember that Joanna de Angelis talks about in the conscious being, the book in the introduction, that in a general sense says, begin from where you are. Because a conscious being does not guilt itself or not. And may that stay with us right at the beginning of our conversation, to know there's always time, there's always something we can do. And even if we cannot comprehend our situations, there is a reason for the challenges we go through. And if we can see that from a vantage point, love is working. The hand of God somehow is guiding us through that process. So, Thiago, that's what I would like to start with at the first instance. We are organizing our reflections in a philosophical way to kind of ascribe a sense of meaning. When we talk about spiritism or spiritualism, in a transpersonal sense, we necessarily talk about the need to find purpose in that which happens in life. So when we cannot say goodbye to somebody whom we love and that person discarnates, when there's time for a conciliation, when there's no time for conciliation between a father or a son, or when a son abandons the family and regrets but it's too late. In the cycles of reincarnation, there always will be time. The problem is that many times while we are incarnate, we don't understand life as we later on, when we discarnate, we are able to comprehend. And this is important because in the group of questions that Kardec poses to the spirits, so tell me, when we discarnate, how is this remembering our this immediate experience that we just had and the previous incarnations we had, is it possible for us to have access to this collection of images and memories? And they say yes. And what's important for us is that they tell us that every spirit, sooner or later, will analyze their choices, will analyze their lives, We'll analyze their relationships, whether they have been interrupted, or maybe those that were betrayed, or in which they betrayed somebody else, or those in which they noticed that they did not love as well as they could, or felt not loved. And think about all the possibilities with others will eventually be analyzed and rediscovered. And almost as if by a impulse of life, and Carl Gustav Jung says there is a pulse, a force in the soul that necessarily conducts the soul to realize its potential itself. This discovery in the Jungian proposal helps us organize our thoughts to understand that a law of progress, of a law of natural evolution, it organizes life individually and collectively. So all of us, after this life, will have time to gather some previous memories. To do what? To organize and prepare for our future. And as almost as if it were a pearl necklace, each incarnation is connected in chain, connected together as souls connect in groups so that they may evolve and be better. They become more ethical so that they may be more fair and love more. So spirits in their own time will identify as they dig deep into the chest trove of their memories. They will identify, oh, I still have challenges with this person. And this is family, and we might explore this a little bit more, friends, because it is in family that many times spirits who have challenge with each other must gather again to overcome that. So as we gather those memories, whichever is possible in our history, we are going to be called to that. For instance, Dan, Pearl, Fabricio, all of you need to reincarnate. Some of you will be born in Brazil, others will be born in the United Kingdom, others perhaps in France. But in your own time, you will meet each other again, and you have a commitment, a connection, and you need to reconnect. And that takes place in family as in the most extensive relationships. There is always a positive purpose for the creation of this common trail in the journey of the spirit. So we talked about sympathies and antipathies of the spirit. We have to understand that living is not easy, and live in relationships is really hard many times, but there's no way of escaping it. What today, what can be a relationship between parents and children or between partners. And if that is hard, it's probably because at some point in the past it was not positive. And there is a need for a movement of reparation, of rebuilding connections through love, through care, through patience, through tolerance, so that we can have new possibilities. To what purpose? I am again drinking the chalice of hurt here. But why? Because there is a purpose. The purpose is not to be canceled, passive, or be engaged in abusive or pathological relationships. No. It's about being able to amplify our understanding of that which is happening with us and be able to consciously make decisions, emotionally and rationally, in relation to what we want for our lives. What do you think, Guadalupe? It is a big laboratory where every moment we can experiment ourselves with different relationships so that we may continue in this reincarnation project. It is in the families that we often find the greatest challenges, much the same way that it is also the family in which we feel very supported. But it's important to highlight that our God is a God of
que nós
love,
não
of pure love, and
dentro
that
dessa
we
dinâmica
don't find
familiar
ourselves in
por
the
punição.
familial
Nós
dynamic for
estamos
punishment
justamente de
purposes.
volta a
No,
trazer essa
this is an
questão como uma
opportunity
oportunidade
for
de
reparation,
lidar, de
for
desenvolver a
developing tolerance,
tolerância, a
patience,
paciência,
to work on our
o
self
egoísmo
centeredness, and so
e assim
forth.
por diante.
Each
Cada um
one
de
of us
nós vai ter uma estrutura
will have a
espiritual,
spiritual
psicológica
and
muito
psychological
profunda.
structure that's very
E nós
complex.
vamos perder
And we
muito
may lose a
tempo
lot
se
of
nós
time if
quisermos
we
ficar
try
entendendo
to stop
exatamente o que
to
tem por
understand
trás
exactly
desse
everything that
mistério
is behind all of
interno,
this.
que também é um
Life is
mistério.
also a mystery.
Então, é realmente
So it's
vivenciar cada
important to really
momento é o
experience
principal.
every moment.
Dentro disso, acho
And within that,
importante a
I
gente
also find it
também
important, and we
lembrar
should remind
que
ourselves
nem sempre
that not
dizer
always saying
sim
yes, it
é o
is
sim do amor,
a yes of love,
ou
or that
dizer
we
não
say
é o
no,
não
that is a
da
no of
rejeição.
rejection.
Ou seja,
That
quanto mais
is,
eu me
the more
conheço e conheço
I know
as questões
myself and moral
morais
questions
do
of the spirit.
espírito, e aí estou falando da
And I'm
moral
talking
do
about the
self
self
e
here
não da
and
moral
not the
dos
moral of
homens, que nem
men
sempre são
and the
iguais,
civilizations, which are not always the
mas eu
same.
vou ter
But
elementos
I
para
will have
realmente me
elements
movimentar, seja no
to
âmbito familiar
navigate the
ou em outros
familial
locais da minha
nucleus
vida,
or other
realmente
places
de uma
in
forma
a
mais
more
coesa
coherent
em
way
relação às leis
as it relates to divine
divinas.
laws.
Porque muitas vezes,
Why is it that I'm bringing this up?
muitas vezes nós podemos
Many
ter
times we may have a
nascido em
son
uma
or
família
daughter
onde nós
to
dizemos
whom we
sempre
always say
sim,
yes because we
porque
love
a gente
them and we
ama, a
think
gente
that
se
saying yes all the
envolve,
time
mas
is the
não
best thing
deixando
to
de
love
dar
them, and
limite,
we
de
miss the
dar o
opportunity to give them
controle
limits
e até
and even to
ministrar
frustrate
a essa
children.
criança, futuro adulto.
Other
Outras
times,
vezes é
it's exactly the
exatamente o
opposite.
contrário, né?
We
Nós
say no
dizemos não
to
porque ela
somebody who
precisa
needs a
disso.
yes.
Então isso é
So
muito
that's very
complexo, não
complex.
tem
And
o
and
certo
there's no right or
ou
wrong
errado, como nós
as we would like
gostaríamos que
them to
tivesse,
exist
desculpa, do
from a
ponto de
rational
vista racional,
perspective,
mas é na
but it
entrega,
is in
é em
doing it
realmente
ourselves.
de
It is
olhar
in
de
kneeling down
joelhos
and
e
asking,
perguntar,
Lord,
Senhor, o
what
que
would
quer
you
que o
have
Senhor
me do?
faça no
In the
sentido
sense of
de dar vida e viver
to
até o último
live
gole, ou
life
seja,
from beginning to
todo
the
dia
last minute
tentar ser
and
Ele.
every
Então eu
day
rogo ao
to try to
Senhor
be the
que a
best version
melhor
of
versão
ourselves, as it is often said
e
nowadays.
realmente eu vou conseguindo
It
me
is this way that I
organizar
am able
ao
to move
desenvolver
myself
mais
to a place with
saudáveis,
healthier
mais
relationships, with more
autênticas,
authentic
mais
relationships
direcionadoras
that
de
may be capable
pensamento,
to better
também
direct a
a
spirit who is
consciência.
growing
Isso
their
acho
consciousness.
que é muito interessante
And I
a gente
think that is
trazer, né,
very important for us to
aos
bring that to
bispos,
the front
porque muitas vezes nós ficamos presos na culpa
because many
ou em
times we
algumas
are
questões
stuck
religiosas um
in
pouco mais
guilt
superficiais,
and
onde a
more
gente
superficial
tem que aceitar
challenges in
tudo,
which we
onde a
have to
gente não
accept
pode dizer
everything and
não,
we think we
ou um
cannot say
desempenho
no,
familiar que
where
às
we may
vezes é
even
tão
have a member of
violento
our
que o
family who's
nosso, a gente tem que
violent towards
aguentar
us
até o
and we have
final.
to
Então,
deal with
como
it
o
to the
Tiago
end.
também trouxe de outra
And as
maneira, isso é muito
Tiago brought for
relativo.
us, all that is
Como
very
Joana de
relative.
Angelis já traz,
And
do
Joanna de Angelis already
auto-conhecimento,
brings to us in a book, Love,
a
Unconquerable Love,
máxima, o mandamento, amar
that
a
the
Deus
greatest
sobre todas as
commandment is
coisas
to
e ao
love God
próximo
above
como a
all
nós
things
mesmos.
and our
O
neighbor as
nosso ideal
ourselves.
evolutivo
In our
nos ensina que
evolutionary
nós devemos
stage,
começar
we
aplicando
should start
o
by
auto-amor,
learning self love,
porque só
that
com o
only through
auto-amor é
self
que
love,
realmente, de uma
in a
forma mais
more
inteira, a gente vai
fulfilling
amar o
way, I am
próximo
able to love
e assim
others
entender o
and
amor
then
de
be able
Deus
to
sobre todas as
understand
coisas.
love
Então, não é uma
of God
inversão
above
nem
all
um
things.
mandamento,
So it's not an
mas sim uma
inversion, a
forma de
reversal
viver a
of
nossa
the commandment,
consciência
but it's a way
plenamente,
of
viver
working our
plenamente
consciousness
o
to
amor
fully
de
live
Deus.
divine love.
E isso,
And that,
Tiago, também
Tiago,
queria,
I
né,
also wanted
trazer
to
um pouco
bring
assim e te
some
escutar.
perspectives and listen to
Isso é
you.
muito
I also think that
importante
is very important
porque é difícil a gente
because
saber o
it's
que é
hard
certo,
to
o
find
que
out
é
what's
errado.
right and what's
Muitos de
wrong. And
nós ficam pensando,
many
mas o
of
que que eu
us
fiz ou
may
por
even ask, what
omissão,
have I
por
done to
falta de
deserve this?
compreensão
And so
e
forth.
assim por diante. E realmente a gente
And
nunca
we will
tem uma
not have this
resposta
great rational
racional,
answer.
né?
And so we have to work on this, and I'd love to hear your perspective on these questions. And with this other kind of reason, the reason that comes from the heart, and which leads us to think about our feelings, which is also a rational function. And we're reminded of Jung again, that brings us this reality that we don't fully understand what feelings are, and many of us don't even know that we have feelings. And thus we return to the beginning of this great dream that we have of love, of fulfillment, of plenitude, of happiness. It needs to start with this look towards ourselves. What is interesting in us, what is not great in us, and what's fragile, and so forth. That is very important, Guadalupe, what you bring up. And it's great for us to understand that even if life is as simple as it can be, and or even the hidden life in which we live in a very small city that is forgotten by everybody, there always will be commitments that cannot be postponed in the field of relationships. In a specific time, for instance, in a place near Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, I have a friend, Gabriel. He's in the terminal stage of a degenerative illness. In very difficult material circumstances, there's a network of friends who helps the family. And it's not just the experience. It's not enough to be in a situation that tests our body and spirit, but it is how we behave and conduct ourselves in that experience. It's interesting because this spiritist family, and even though they had all kinds of problems that happen every day, they were able to find a meaning and strength to withstand something that has lasted for 20 years. Somebody who's been bedridden for 20 years without being able to move. So all of us bring with us the commitments that in our lives. Perhaps it's a congenital disease. Perhaps it's knowing that I will reincarnate and know that my family will have serious difficulties dealing with relationships. Sometimes we have mothers and fathers who are visited by feelings of hatred and disappointment towards their children. And culture and society tells us that we should love our children, but I'm not able to love them and I hate them. And that is very strong, but that does exist. That is part of life. Without reincarnation, without understanding reincarnation, it would be hard for us to comprehend that. We have also heard from fathers and mothers feeling very guilty for loving one son more than the other, or vice versa. And they demand of themselves to feel something that they cannot fake. This has to come naturally from the soul. We also see situations in which we have reciprocal hatred between siblings. I knew, for instance, a story between brothers who used to hate each other from early age, and that has lasted to this date. And the last part of this relationship, for instance, the younger son has refused to invite the older brother to his wedding. No, you're not going to my wedding. Our parents will go, but not you. So where does that come from? Where does that resentment come from that does not have a source in this present life? So it must be from a previous one. Where do these passions that are developed between daughters and fathers, in which sometimes it feels like it's not just love, it's deeper. Or sons and mothers that create the Oedipus complex, and that now we understand through reincarnation that to be former connections for lovers who are reconfigured in a family as parents and children, mother and son, or daughter and father, to work through commitments of love and realization, and not incest, which sometimes happens, which triggers even other serious problems. So you can see there's scenes of practical life that show us the complexity, our feelings, our emotions that visit us, and end up organizing the effective life of our family. All of us go through this. So the invitation is, how do I experience or savor this experience? How do I live through something that is really hard? And how do I qualify that experience, even if it makes me cry? Who here has never cried because in a relationship for something that escapes us, or a life that goes away and we wish that we could hold it for a little longer? So see that the manner in which we conduct our relationships is far more important than the formality of it. I am by somebody is because I'm a spiritist and I found this person and now I must be with them until the end of life. That doesn't make sense, because relationships, they must promote the soul and not crystallize the soul. So if the soul stagnates, if something paralyzes, if something is no longer mobilized out of love, what maintains that relationship beyond a supposed debt we have to each other's, or perhaps a guilt that we may feel? So we need to qualify every emotional experience, a relational experience we have, and represent them from that which we understand to be an ethics of living, or that in which philosophy is sometimes said that I recognize others in their needs, and I also need to know my own, and I respect others as others because they are sensitive, sensible, and thoughtful. And it's in this anthology that I recognize others in that position and want to be recognized in that position. And that code of ethics is written in Spiritism as in the proposal that Jesus brought forth for a new world. So what is revolutionary when we think about relationships in the field of affections, and whether we consider relationships healthy or unhealthy? It's about asking ourselves, where do I want to take these relationships to? Will I continue to keep myself imprisoned in a relationship because I feel like there is a commitment that cannot be broken, when the relationship should be structured out of love? So the practice of freedom, even in situations of difficult relationship, it goes all the way to the limits, and our emotional limits, friends, are present in the smallest chapter in the gospel explained by Spiritism. Do you know what chapter that is? It's the one that talks about marriage. Kardec was very aware that that was a difficult topic, and we shouldn't be dictating rules how they should live their life as a couple, because each one of us has a different way of relating. There is no right or wrong, that you have to do this. Each one has to experience that. Each one of us establishes their values, rules, of how to care for others or care for self. So we need to master ourselves in the sense of how we face our commitment in a careful way. Well, but what if it doesn't work? Sometimes we are in the cycle of multiple existences to try to calm down hatreds and anguishes that are really ancient. And perhaps we are only diluting a little bit that enemy that has persecuted us for a very long time. It can be a colleague. Sometimes becoming a child can be loved but hate you. It may start to respect you but not love you. But in the next incarnation, they might become a friend. He begins to trust or respect the symbolical authority in a relationship. So this friend in time may become a love. So what we have been talking about a long time ago will demand time. And we cannot demand ourselves, especially when it comes to emotional relationships, one of the hardest and most difficult parts of human experience, to demand immediate responses. So let's respect ourselves. Let's comprehend a cycle of multiple incarnations when it comes to relationships sometimes, so that we can better understand what living is. I extended myself a little bit, but Guadalupe, maybe you can come in here.
Tá ótimo, tava te
No, that's
ouvindo.
great.
E não é um checklist.
And it's not a checklist.
Então, não
So it's not like I've done this, I've done this. There is this complexity and this mystery that is part of our existence. I was hearing you and I remember a sentence from Ettinger, a Jungian analyst, that says that the limit of men is the opportunity of God. And I think it's a beautiful quote that has a lot to do with relationships in general, in families or not. And it's a beautiful quote because it is in that we are tested and led to limits. But we also find this great opportunity to mature, to grow our conscience. I think it's interesting to also share from what Tiago was mentioning, and as it developed, it was really beautiful what you said, Tiago. This question of what is religion, this reconnection, or when we talked about the sacred or the numinous, and how this careful posture towards life takes place. So the invitation to reincarnation and emotional connections and everything that touches these challenges brings us an invitation for an attitude in which we should be cautious towards life. And that God is life and life is love. So I take care of myself, I take care of others with a lot of consciousness. For me and for other people, Tiago. And so that we don't go into self-guilt and project it onto others, it's also important for us to bring to our conversations really quickly that when James Hollis, another Jungian analyst, works in a book called Project Eden, and says that in relationships we may go in the search for this magical other, the projections of our relationships. Is that old story of the enchanted prince. And so it's important for us to understand that it often takes place when we are thinking about relationships of love relationships. A lot of that Hollis brings to us that it comes from two big wounds, one of the rejection and abandonment. So if we understand
que seja dessa vida ou de outras,
that
nós
whether it comes from
mesmos
this life or other
fomos
lives that we have been rejected or
rejeitados ou
abandoned,
abandonados,
and
e
accept
aceitasse a
this
nossa
frailty of
fragilidade
ours
e
and look
olhar
at
para
that,
isso, a gente também
we'll
consegue
be able
realmente
to
se
relate
relacionar
to
com o
others
outro a partir de quem o
uh,
outro é.
in a way that
E
they
não
are,
uma
and
projeção
not
maciça
through
das nossas
a
ânsias,
massive
das nossas
projections of our
dificuldades e
desires, our
das nossas
frailties.
fragilidades. Isso na
This, in
teoria
theory,
parece
seems very
fácil, mas
easy,
na
but in
prática é
practice, it's very hard.
difícil, né? Porque além de suportar
Because
o outro
besides
como ele é,
withstanding
eu preciso
others
suportar
as
a
they
mim
are, I
mesmo.
also need to accept
E
myself as I
esse
am.
é o
And
grande
that is a
encargo,
great
né?
burden,
Nós
to be able
suportarmos as nossas
to
complexidades, as
tolerate
nossas
ourselves, our
contradições,
contradictions, our challenges,
entender que nós vamos ter um lado muito
and comprehend that we
desenvolvido,
may have a
estruturado,
side that is
muito
very developed in
organizado,
structure,
que
and another that
algumas
may be very frail,
situações para
and
nós
that some
podem
situations
ser
for us may be really
banais no
simple
sentido
and
de
easy
não
to
nos
navigate and
tocar
may not touch our
emocionalmente,
feelings,
e outras
and
para
others may
nós, para outra
be simple
pessoa,
for
podem
others,
fazer ruir
but
o
may
nosso
bring
mundo
our
psicológico.
psychological world
Então,
crumbling down.
olhar para nós,
So
entendendo
it's about
que nós
losing us.
somos, volto a trazer, como o Tiago trouxe, herdeiros de nós
And
mesmos.
as Tiago brought
E
to us,
sim,
we are
nós vamos
heirs
estar
of
trabalhando
ourselves.
culpas,
Yes, we're going to work in our
rejeições,
rejections, abandonment,
abandonos,
guilt,
fragilidades,
frailties,
agressividades,
aggressiveness. We're
faz
going to be working
parte
on all of these.
dessa,
And it is part,
de viver, né, de sentir
and this
sentimento,
kind of
essa
feeling
experiência
as we live.
faz
It's part
parte
of
dessa
this
dinâmica do
dynamic of
trabalho
the spiritual work
espiritual dentro
that
das
we must do within
relações e
relationships.
tudo de bom do ponto de
And
vista
everything
espiritual, por mais
that is good
difícil
in
que
a
seja
spiritual
essa
perspective,
situação,
even if relationships are
isso
hard,
pode nos trazer.
it can bring
E
to us.
antes né, Tiago,
And
dessa
before I pass that back
partilha,
to
queria
you,
lembrar
Tiago, I
também
also
para
want to
o
remind
pessoal,
you that
se
you have
ainda
not
não
yet
leu,
read.
e que é
I would suggest that
livro
you read this very
interessante,
interesting book
do André
called
Luiz,
Missionaries
Missionários
of
da
the
Luz,
Light
onde ele traz
by Andrew
justamente
Lewis,
toda
where he
essa
brings this
questão,
question.
toda a
The
série
whole series
trata
talks
de
about this, but that
missionários
book
do
in
plantio
particular, this
encarnatório,
reincarnatory
trazendo o
planning
cuidado
process
que a
and seeing the
espiritualidade tem
care
conosco
that
antes
spirituality
de nós
has with us
entrarmos na
before we come
atmosfera
in into the human
Então,
atmosphere,
nada é por
and that nothing
acaso.
happens by
Existe
chance,
realmente ali
but
um
there is indeed
cuidado
a tending
que
of our future that
sensibiliza para nós
touches
pensar
us
no quanto que André Luiz nos trouxe a
as
respeito
to how
disso.
much
E
Andrea
que
Luiz has taught us
nas,
about
nas
that.
situações mais
So even in the
difíceis,
hardest
seja ligado à
situations, whether they
doença,
are
seja
connected to
ligado a
illnesses
dificuldades
or
familiares,
family
familiar,
problems
profissional,
or
que a gente
professional
lembre que nós
challenges,
estamos
may we
sendo
remember that we are
cuidados
being tended
e que
to,
às vezes
and that
realmente nós
sometimes that we
vamos
will
ter muita
have
dificuldade
a lot
de
of
caminhar
challenge to
por
be able to
essas
walk with our
lutas,
own legs.
mas que aí em uma
But in
resignação
an act of
ativa, como
resignation,
Joana usa esse termo,
as
que a gente
Joanna
siga em
says it, we need
frente
to
e
keep moving
realmente olha
forward, that we may
peça ajuda
pray, ask for
e se
help,
coloque também em um lugar
and
de
place ourselves
doação
in
em
a
relação a
location
essas
in the center of a
às
relationship where
vezes
sometimes I
essas
give and sometimes I
nesse
receive.
movimento de
In this moments of
contração, de
contraction
expansão, que não
and
é só do nosso
expansion, it's
coração,
not
da nossa
just from the
psique,
heart
da
or
clínica,
psyche, but from the whole
e
universe.
nesse lugar onde o que está em
And in this
cima
place where we
está
see that
embaixo,
which is up could be down, and what could be
em
down
que
can
a
be
minha
up,
psique
in which our
também
psyche
representa
also
a psique
represents the collective
coletiva,
psyche.
ou seja, a guerra
So war
não está só
is not
dentro
just
de mim, de
outside,
alguma maneira,
it is
não
also
está em
within
mim e
me,
eu sou
and I am
responsável
responsible
por ela.
for that.
Quando eu olho a
When I
criação
look
e a nossa
at
realidade de um
creation
ponto de vista mais
and
amplo,
I see things from
onde
a
eu sou
more
uma
ample
gota no
perspective,
oceano,
where
mas
I
eu
am a
também sou
drop in the
parte
ocean, but I'm also
desse
part of this
oceano.
ocean,
E que a gente vai
and that we
entendendo,
begin to
te
understand.
enrolei, né, Tiago? Porque disse que a
I
gente
said I was going to
ia
return it back
falar
to
no
you, but I'm still
próximo.
talking, Thiago. Sorry for
E
that.
que aí realmente a
And
gente
that we
vá
really
entendendo que
begin to
nós estamos
understand
no mundo para
to
aprender a
learn how
compartilhar
to
e não
collaborate and
competir,
not compete,
para
to
desenvolver
develop
algo
the
em
law
nós
of
que não
love
se
that sustain
sente
us,
e já é. E que a gente que não sente
and that we do not may
plenamente,
always feel the
a
law
gente
of love,
fazer o que puder
and that we should do whatever it is that we
A gente não
can,
vai conseguir
because we
fazer
won't be able
todas
to do
essas
everything in
ações
this
no quarto, mas
incarnation,
que a gente, a
but that
cada
every
minuto,
minute or
a cada
day of
dia,
it,
a gente procure
may
sempre
we
dar o melhor de
strive to
nós,
give our best.
né?
It's
E
that
é
simple.
simples assim, né?
But
Só
in
que na
practice, it's a lot
prática
harder.
é difícil, né, gente? Né, Tiago?
That is the challenge for sure.
Um desafio.
É um desafio.
Você traz uma
You
ideia
brought a
muito
very
importante,
important idea,
que é a busca
the
por
search for a new
sentido
meaning
que possa
that may help us
organizar
organize our
nossa
lives
vida, para que a gente possa
so that we may feel,
pensar
think, and
e
reflect
refletir a
on
vida
life through
por
a
uma
new
perspectiva.
perspective.
Ao tratar disso, da busca por lugar
As
novo,
we are
lugar
seeking for
novo
this new
singular,
place,
que é a
this
busca
new
por
singular
sentido,
place,
assim
which is
como
what
os
Spiritism brings us and what spiritualism
elas
brings
estão
us.
convidando
They
os
all
seres
invite
humanos
human beings
para algo
to something that
além
goes beyond that which we are today.
a ideia
The
de que é
idea that it's
possível
possible for us to reach new possibilities, to be more mature, to be more conscious,
de conseguirmos de fato
to be able to
expandir a nossa
expand
amorosidade
our love
para
towards life
de forma que nós
in a
saiamos
way
desse
that we
lugar.
move ourselves from this ordinary place that we
A
sometimes
Joana,
find
em várias
ourselves in.
obras, ela traz
Joanna, in many
uma
of her
ideia
works, brings
que
us
é
an
uma
idea
ideia
that is the idea
da
of
repetição
repetition. We have to
dos
talk about that.
traumas. Uma
There is a
tendência que nós
tendency
temos de
to
repetir
repeat
experiências
traumatic
traumáticas,
experiences,
de
to
repetir
repeat behaviors,
comportamentos e de muitas vezes nos
and in many times
envolvermos em
to get
relacionamentos,
involved
em
in
dinâmicas
relationships
relacionais que são
that are
repetitivas.
repetitive.
Nós repetimos
We
padrões.
repeat
Que
patterns.
lugar é esse da
What is
repetição?
that?
A repetição ela é
Repetition,
quase
it
como
is
se um lugar,
almost
um local, inconscientemente, por
as
defesa,
if it were a place,
não
almost
nos
by a
permitirmos ir
self-defense
além
mechanism,
daquilo
that we do
que
not
já
allow ourselves to go beyond that which we have already
Então,
experienced.
lugar de nos
So
sentirmos
we
sempre frágeis,
always feel
dependentes
frail and
emocionalmente,
dependent
nos fará
emotionally,
comumente
will
mudar para
have us
pessoas
seek
em que
for
nós somos
partners who will
dependentes
keep us
ou que
dependent
muitas
or who
vezes
may
não
abuse
vão
us
mudar de nós
emotionally
emocionalmente. Até que
until we find
compreendamos que
a
nós somos
time that we
merecedores
understand that we are deserving of other dynamics
e nós
and
não
that we do not need to repeat
repetir
this
esse
very
padrão.
pattern.
Quando os espíritos nos dizem
When the spirits
que
tells us
pessoas e
that
circunstâncias
people
de vida
as circumstances
trarão
of lives
mensagens
will bring us
representativas daquilo que a alma
messages that are
precisa
representative of what
para
our soul needs to mature.
né? Muitas vezes somos
Many
visitados,
times we are visited and say, "Oh,
acho que hoje
I've
o
learned to
irmão
be
falou mais
patient quite a bit
paciente, de
today,"
repente
and all of a
aparece
sudden somebody
um
comes to test our patience.
ou muitas
Or
vezes nós
sometimes we believe to be in an emotional place, and life brings us experiences to really test us to see if we are truly
estarmos de fato
in that position we thought that we were.
Então, nós
So commonly,
repetimos
we repeat conducts and behaviors
heranças do nosso
that are repeated from our spiritual past.
As pessoas muitas vezes têm a curiosidade de encontrar
People sometimes are often curious about their memories. Who was I? Where did I live? When in truth, the study that is dedicated to who we are today should take place. What is my desire? What do I want from my life? What are my virtues? What are my problems? What are my challenges? And I'm sure that these nucleus, these questions are representative of who we were in the past. And these are tools through which we have to work on our maturing.
Como a jornada do espírito ela tem que ser ascendente e não retrógrada,
because this journey of the spirit has to always go up, we have a commitment. If I wish a new way of feeling life and comprehend life, we have a new paradigm, thus, that propels us to do what? To leave this ordinary place, commonplace, that which Divaldo Franco talks about and calls the routine of empty people. We wake up, we eat, we sleep,
nós dormimos,
we work,
nós trabalhamos,
we
nós
exercise,
estudamos, nós
we
vivenciamos a
experience sexual
sociedade,
encounters,
nós consumimos
we
aquilo que a
consume
cultura
what our
nos
culture tells
disponibiliza
us
para
to,
consumir e nós
and we
nos
do not
distraímos
often
muitas vezes do
go
além.
beyond this,
É esse
this
ordinário
ordinary piece of the
que a
world,
Joana de Angelis nos
what the
convoca
Joanna
a
de
colocar
Angelis
em
asks
xeque,
us to put in check.
de dizer assim, estas questões, a
And these
conquista das
questions, the achievements of
sociedades econômicas,
culture, of
as
economics, of
possibilidades
social
sociais,
mobility and status,
tudo isso
all
são
of these
meios
are
pelos
means
quais
through which the
o
spirit
espírito se
must develop itself.
E aqui reunidos em torno da ideia
And as
de
we talked
falarmos do
about these
compromisso das
commitments from an
relações
emotional
afetivas,
perspective,
as relações não são só
relations
somente
are not just relations
sentimentais,
for
mas
relationships.
elas
They are
são
for
para todo
something deeper.
mundo. É para
It's for
cada
each
alma que
of
está
the souls who
envolvida.
are involved in a relationship.
É para uma
It's for a
jornada que não está
journey that may
circunscrita
not be
apenas
circumscribed in just one
mas com a
existence,
possibilidade de
but
que
with the
o quanto eu fui
possibility
capaz de aprender a amar
of
nesse
how much
novo
I'm able to
relacionamento que eu
love
nunca aprendi com
in
ninguém.
this new relationship as I have never
Como me sentir
learned before,
respeitado em uma relação,
is
como
to
me
feel as
sentir
respected
respeitado.
in this new relationship
Mas
as I have
para
never
conseguirmos
before.
nos
But
colocar nesta
to
posição,
place ourselves in that
precisamos
position, we have to
incorporar,
reconfigure,
nós
we need to
precisamos compreender,
comprehend,
nós
we need
precisamos
to
sair
leave
dos
the
padrões
patterns of repetition
que nós
in which we commonly place
porque
ourselves,
comumente nós
because
repetimos
commonly
os
we,
mesmos problemas.
we repeat the same challenges in our
Quando
lives.
nós poderíamos estar dando
Do you know how
passos
could
mais
we be doing
qualitativos
like a bigger
nesse
jump in our
sentido,
incarnatory process?
como agora,
Like for instance,
quando
here
nós
we are
estamos na
today
terça-feira à noite,
studying
estudando
philosophy
filosofia,
and spiritism. We're talking about
frutos,
virtues, values, possibilities,
possibilidades de sermos
so that we
mais
can be
além
more
do que
than what we
somos.
are.
Isso são
These are
ingredientes
ingredients that are
fundamentais para
fundamental
pensarmos uma
for
vida
us to
além
think
do
about a
ordem.
life beyond the
Então,
ordinary.
quer ver
Do you
um
want to
exemplo
see an
disso?
example of repetition, for instance?
Uma vez, um
Once a
jovem
young
me contou,
person told me,
eu
I
tinha
was 20
20
years
anos
old and I
e
had a
eu tive um
dream
sonho que eu estava em
that I
cruzamento
was
entre duas
crossing two
avenidas de uma
avenues
cidade da
in a
região
city in the
sudeste,
southeast of Brazil,
uma cidade onde
the
ele
city
morava.
where he lived.
E do outro
And
lado
the other
dessa
side of
avenida,
this avenue,
eu vi uma moça.
I saw a
Provavelmente ela
woman
me olhava
who would look at me
com roupas que não eram
with
desta nossa
clothes that were
época.
not from this time. And as
E
I
ao ver
saw her in my
aquele
sleep,
jovem,
I started
eu
to
comecei a
cry
chorar, como se
as
quisesse
if I
saber
wanted to
decididamente ir
desperately
ao encontro dela.
go and meet her.
Mas era um horário
But
de
there was intense
trânsito muito
traffic,
importante.
and
E
there's
nós
no way
queríamos
that I could
atravessar
cross
aquela
that
rua.
road.
E fiquei me
And in my
contemplando
dream,
através
I
dela,
contemplated that
que era
woman, which was
uma
a
jovem
young woman,
adolescente
younger than I
jovem
was,
que eu. E ela me
and
olhava
she would look at
fixamente,
me
não dizia nada, eu chorava,
fixedly,
chorava,
and
chorava.
I would just cry, cry, cry.
Acordei
I woke up
molhado de
wet
tanto
from crying
chorar,
so much, physically as well.
fisicamente.
This
Esse
young man,
jovem passou-se
a
muitos
long
anos.
time went by, he got married and had many
E um
children.
dia,
And
ao
once
mudar
when
de
he
emprego,
changed jobs,
ele chega
he
na
goes
nova
to a new
posição,
department.
na nova empresa.
And who does he
Onde que
meet?
ele encontra? Vou
I'll
chamar de
let you figure it out.
sereia. Ele
He meets
encontra
this
uma tia
very
já
same
adulta,
young woman, which is
cuja
now
mãe
a
era
grown
adulta.
woman. But he
Mas ele
says
diz assim que
that
o
my shock
choque foi
was to
idêntico, o
have the
mesmo
same
jeito,
dream, the
o
same
mesmo
hair, the
cabelo,
same
o
look
mesmo olhar.
of my
E
dream.
ao me ver, ela
And when she
também
looked at
ficou
me, she was
imobilizada por aquela
also
dimensão.
shaken by something very strong. And he
Ele falou
said,
assim: se eu
if I
não
were
fosse
not
espírita,
spirits,
eu
I
possivelmente
possibly
teria
would have
largado meu
maybe dropped my
casamento
wedding to
para
go
viver
through that
essa experiência,
experience.
que eu
And I
não
don't know
sei
what that
como é
would
que
be
seria.
like. And he needed to
O
go
que
through
os espíritos,
therapy.
o que os
What do the
espíritos
spirits
falam
tell us
sobre
about
isso?
that?
Na questão
In question 386,
386,
Kardec asks,
podem
can
dois
two
seres
beings
que se
who
conheceram
have
e
met and
estimaram
esteemed each other
se
meet
reencontrar numa
again in a
outra
new
existência
existence and
quando
recognize
se
each other?
conhecerem?
Isn't that an interesting question? And
Responde
the
assim o
spirits
espírito:
respond, to
reconhecer-se
recognize each
não,
other? No,
podem,
but
porém,
they may feel
sentir-se
attracted
atraídos um para
to
o
each
outro.
other. And frequently,
Frequentemente,
that
essa é a
is the
causa
cause
de
of
íntimas
intimate
relações
relationships
fundadas em sincera
based
afeição.
in sincere affection.
São
There are two spirits who feel attracted and that search for each other in the middle of a crowd. Isn't that beautiful? And all of us are enmeshed in these stories of emotional or romantic connections and relive all these relationships we had in the past. And every story is a story. And each one of them will know in their conscious how to conduct themselves in these processes. I say that because when we bring reincarnation to the stage of life, we realize how complex understanding relationships can be, especially in this place of affection. How do we find old loves? And sometimes we may find even supposed ancient loves, which is different. Somebody who may break their current weddings now in this life to live that experience, and they regretted it because that was only a passion. And what is to relive that passion just for the passion? Our soul sometimes has trouble going beyond this process so that it may develop possibilities of deeper feelings, that is to live this sexuality, this connection, and live love. So here's the challenge that is sent to us: to master ourselves, to take responsibility for the choices of our actions, our relationships, with more responsibility. Spiritist ethics requires responsibility. Whichever our choices are, we'll be responsible for them. And we will take them with us. If we don't solve them in this life, we'll take them to the next one. The spirits tell us that daughters oftentimes have emotional problems. Could be an old lover of the father who are now their father, and the opposite is also possible. And difficult sons sometimes are old affections, their betrays, abandons. So the nucleus of family seems to be a central place in which reincarnation brings us together so that we may deal with the commitments that cannot be postponed of developing a relationship and, in a deeper sense, love. What do you think, Guadalupe? Does that make sense to you?
Sim, claro. Estava aqui pensando o quanto isso
Yes, it
vai ao
does.
encontro
And I was thinking
também de
about
algo que nós
how
vamos
that
abordar
connects to
mais esse
something that
ano,
we will
o
bring
pensamento
later in the
desafiante,
year,
a
which is
vontade,
thought,
nesse
desire,
trabalho com
and
com
will,
essa dinâmica
and how this work in our
psíquica,
psyche is important.
porque nessa
Because in
tua
this last story
história
that you told
tem
us,
muito algo que a gente
there's
pretende
something that we
abordar
want
no
to
nosso congresso em
cover in our
setembro.
Congress in September.
Aliás, estamos
And a matter of
muito
fact, we are very
empolgados
excited for that and preparing that
trabalhando aí, tentando dar
to
o
give the
melhor
best of
resultado.
us.
É algo que nós vamos abordar
And
que é
something
o
we'll
desejo
address,
enquanto
which is the
impulso
desire
e o querer
as an
enquanto
impulse
emoção
and
consciente.
also as a
Então,
conscious
nessas
desire.
dinâmicas de relacionamento
So in this dynamics of
que o nosso
relationships, as
Paulo
Thiago brings us,
precisa ver essa
we need to have this
responsabilidade
responsibility from a
espiritual.
spiritual perspective.
Volto a dizer, não
It's
é
not about
certo ou
right and
errado,
wrong.
mas é realmente como
It's to think
ser
as a spiritual
espiritual que
being
está
who
por
is
trás
living a
desse
physical
pensamento
experience
e procurar
and
entender
seek
o que está
to
acontecendo
understand what
nessas
is happening in their
situações, para
circumstances
daí então
so that
agir
we
de
may
forma
act in a conscious
consciente.
way.
Aqui, nesse exemplo
And in
que o
this
Thiago deu
example,
dois,
Thiago
uma
gave us
ação
two,
mais
one of them that was more
consciente e outra
conscious
então
and one
mais
more connected to
emocional.
impulse.
Porque são
Because
nessas
these are
questões que a
questions of
gente nós
life
somos pegos,
in which we are
pegos,
oftentimes
como eu vou dizer,
caught
uma
and knocked
rasteira,
down.
mas uma rasteira
And sometimes
por
we
nós
knock
mesmos,
ourselves
pelo
down,
nosso
the ego
ego que
that
nos
that
alça a perna
throws us to the
por uma
ground
falta de
for our
conhecimento de
lack
quem
of
nós
knowledge of who
somos.
we are.
Então a gente precisa sempre estar com
So we need to
essa questão
have
muito
these issues
clara,
clear
que a
in our
gente vá
minds,
com
that we may
calma,
take our
que se
time,
entenda que dentro do
that we understand that inside our children, father, mother, or whoever has a difficult relationship to us, there's a reality that we do not know and that we may seek with our open hearts to be in touch with our feelings and leverage everything that we have been already able to learn that the superior spirits have brought us, everything that we have learned with the challenges of life, and to really place ourselves in a situation where we can give our best. And again, our best, I say, to be able to collaborate and get closer to the law of love, because at the end of the day, our greatest wish is to be loved. Even if we already love the way we are. We have Jesus, for instance, who loved so much and loves us, and we do not accept ourselves. And because we do not accept ourselves, we don't accept others. Because we don't understand ourselves, we project onto others our challenges. So this task of self-discovery is laborious and slow work, but we have to have responsibility and know that there is a long road ahead. But it is very important and it is urgent. And even if we have already began, may we commit even more to this work of self-discovery. Because all of us has an invaluable place in this great work of creation, and we need to honor that. If we just go through the reincarnatory side of things, because the great religion is love, independent of dogma, we'll see that Spiritist books bring us how many spirits would like a chance of reincarnation, and it's not that easy. So the opportunity we have today, it is also very valuable. And as the Spirit's book says, the incarnate spirit is like a journey person at the beginning of at the foot of the mountain. So if we're here in this moment to have this opportunity to go ahead and to grow our conscience and do so in ways in which we're non-local conscious, which is to go towards self-knowledge, may we understand that we are at the beginning of the mountain, but we can, little by little, to go up. And when we get up there, we'll understand different things. But because figuratively we're still at the bottom, doesn't mean that the mountain does not exist. It does not mean that we don't have a world full of opportunities. And it's not to say that because we don't understand, we're being punished or chastised for that. No. These are opportunities that life brings us, and every relationship is an opportunity. And we'll have to take a position. And this is when the ethics of the self and the spirit come into play. It's not if God willing, things will take place. It is also that we may take control of our lives and take responsibility for a road and know that we will make mistakes because we're moving. But when we do, may we repair our mistakes and keep moving, but to place ourselves at life's disposal at every moment and for all kinds of relations, and even more. But I talk about that from a larger perspective because it's important for us to have it. And it may help us work on the very small, which is not that small, because that is where we live in the challenges of the day-to-day where opportunity lies, and that's very important. Life is today, life is now. It's not tomorrow. I would love to talk about these final minutes for us to talk or think about that we share, condition that we share, our human condition. We're human. Only because we're spiritists doesn't make us less human. We have tools, we study, we read, we search to improve ourselves, but sometimes we find some thorns within us that limit our steps, limit our forgiveness, limit our ability to love, and that is part. And it's important for us to support this humanity that we share. So how do we deal with that, especially when it comes to relationships? How do we deal with the limitations that we have, in front, and when these challenges come? Sometimes we're visited by sadness that doesn't go away. Sometimes we just want to give up. Sometimes we can't see hope before the most challenging days of our lives. All of these conditions are the symbol of that bitter chalice that Jesus drank from. These trials, the invitations from life for our own renewal. As if the soul was stretched in one place and we need to give it some time so that it may settle and bring more possibilities to be more than we are today. We cannot underestimate our conflicts, our pains, our sadness, because that which we say is something negative in us, but it's something that belongs to us. They are basic building blocks for us to be able to understand what is life, what is to accept life, and to bring love to this experience as hard as it can be. Giadetti, the mother of this friend of mine, Gabrielle, who lives in Rio de Janeiro, I see a soul that goes through so many difficult challenges that I say, I don't know if I will be able to withstand that. So these are stories that we hear and we say, how would I act in her place? Every one of us is in a circumstance and we have relations and possibilities that are peculiar to us. And they are invitations for us to develop our consciousness in more love. Often, by being Christian spiritists, we have a challenge to deal with forgiveness, and we're not able to offer forgiveness, and we have that guilt, that thorn for not being able to do it, as if we only wanted to see the happinesses in the soul and not be able to see the pains of the soul. And these pains and happinesses that we have, they are possibilities that are very important for us to arrive at a place where we can feel accomplished in our cycle of incarnations. So it's part of the law of life to incarnate, to live, to love intensely, to discover love, forgiveness, all verbs on the action of experience are a law of life. So it's important for us to reflect on that. We have the journey of everyday life. Days begin, the nights arrive. And we need to ask, what is it that I am discovering and learning every day so that I may grow, become more lucid, more loving, more just, more fair, more conscious? The recipe for all that is just one, is to live. If we hide from life, from being afraid of making mistakes, we will never have the experience of what it is to live for real.
Aqui no Brasil,
Here
tinha
in
um
Brazil,
frei
there is a
importantíssimo,
religious
frei
figure,
católico,
a
Frei
friar,
Alberto Libani,
Alberto
uma
Libani,
pessoa
who
que
has
viveu
lived
por muitos
in
anos em uma
for many
favela
years in a
da grande
shanty
cidade de
town in the city
Vitória, no
of
Espírito
Vitoria and
Santo.
Espírito
Ele
Santo.
disse que aquela
And
experiência
that
de
experience
espiritualidade junto à
as a
população
life with vulnerable
vulnerável
populations has
agregou a ele um
added
valor
great value
inestimável
to
de
him
valorizar o
to know
pouco
how to
que temos.
value the little that we have in
Que a
life.
gente possa, mesmo diante do
May we,
pouco,
even before the very little we have, where this
paciência,
patience or
compreensão.
tolerance, it is
Ela é
the
um
beginning
começo para que a gente possa
of something so that we can produce
prosseguir.
more.
Fora da reencarnação, não
Besides,
tem
outside of
reparação.
reincarnation, there is
Então,
no
ficar
reparation.
reencarnando quantas
So we
vezes
will
for
reincarnate
necessário
as
para
many times as
evoluir,
is
para
needed
que a gente
for
aprenda a
us to be able
amar mais e
to
viver mais.
love more, learn
E
more.
fora do amor, amigo,
And
não há
outside of love,
libertação dos
there is no
processos.
liberation from the processes that
Então,
challenge us.
amor é uma
Love
representação no
is a
espiritismo de uma
representation not only of a
experiência
feeling,
do
but
encontro.
of a meeting
Toda vez que eu
of people.
escuto alguém
Every
com
time that I hear
necessidade,
somebody who
toda
is in
vez que eu
need, every
escuto um
time that
copo
I
d'água
offer
alguém que
somebody a
tem
cup of
sede,
water for
toda vez
somebody
que
who's
eu
thirst,
paro meu tempo para
and every
ouvir a
time that I
experiência
just
de alguém
stop
que
to hear
pede
somebody
ajuda,
who is
eu estou amando.
troubled, I'm loving.
Então,
I'm putting into
o amor
practice.
é o
So
coroamento da
love
vida
is the
humana.
crowning of life in its deepest
Então,
sense.
reencarnar
To
sem
reincarnate
amar,
without being able to
a gente vai
love
ter
is almost
dificuldade
to
no amor.
waste a lifetime.
Se compromissar
To,
afetivamente
to
sem
connect
amor
into a relationship
é um
without having love
descuido consigo e
is
com o
a
outro.
lack of care
Então,
for ourselves and others.
qualifica. Qualifica
So
para
let's
amar
qualify our
com mais
relationships.
amorosidade,
Let's be more
sabendo
loving,
que hoje é tão
knowing that
difícil essa relação,
nowadays
mas
relationships are
com o
so
tempo
hard,
ela vai
but with
encontrar um
time,
caminho.
relationships will
Vai ser
find their way,
libertador
a liberating
esse
way, and
caminho
through
para
patience
prosseguir
and
na
resignation,
reencarnação,
to the
através desse
extent that we
trabalho de
can,
resignação. Ele
it
é
will be fed and nourished
vivenciado
every
todos
single
os
day with
dias
love.
com amor.
Let's think about
Vamos
that.
ouvir.
Muito bonito, Tiago, que
Very beautiful what you said
compartilhou.
now, Thiago.
Eu não sei,
I
Fabrício, se
don't
nós
know if we
temos
have any
alguma
questions.
pergunta. Nós vamos
We
aqui nos
get carried
interagindo, a
away
gente
and we
vai
keep going
seguindo aí sobre esse assunto que é
and
tão
talk about this topic, which is so interesting
instigante
and
e
so touching in many different
mobilizador. Então,
ways,
nós
because it's our day
gostaríamos,
today.
né, que a gente
And
acaba se
sometimes we lose
devolvendo
track in time
agora.
here.
Então,
So if you have
se
any
tiver algo
questions that were brought
do
forth,
público para nos
please do
trazer,
so.
por favor.
Eu acho que nós podemos ir para as considerações finais.
I think that we can go into final considerations.
Então, eu gostaria de convidar vocês para fazer
And I would like to invite you for your final considerations, and I will bring the final announcements.
Tá bem. Bem, de
So, as a
consideração
final
final, a
consideration,
gente realmente, eu acho que as últimas
I think
palavras do
Thiago's
Tiago,
last
elas
words
falaram
said everything.
tudo, né? Então, eu acho que a gente precisa lembrar, assim, que
I think that
o
we need to
mundo é
remember that the
relação.
world is
Nós estamos
relations.
aqui para aprender
We are here to
a
learn to
tolerar e
collaborate
amar.
and
Então,
love.
o convite
And the invitation that Joanna leaves for us, and that's life's invitation,
realmente a
is
nossa
for us to
vida
build our
com muito
lives
amor,
as a hymn
amor
of
a
love
Deus,
and
como
gratitude towards
prometido
God,
dela,
because
Deus é
God is
vida
life, as Joanna says in the
e é
book,
amor.
and life
E
is
que a gente
love.
lembre, né, que às vezes a gente
And
vai
may we remember
precisar
that sometimes we'll need to
de
ask for help.
auxílio, e nós somos
And
espíritos
we are
humanos
spirits
e
having a
nós
human
podemos
experience,
errar,
and that's okay.
e às vezes a gente vai
And
auxiliar.
sometimes we'll be able to help others.
Na maioria das vezes, a gente vai estar
And many
fazendo
times we'll be
todos
doing
isso
both.
junto. Então, a minha
So my final
mensagem
message
final, eu lembro dos espíritos mais
is
evoluídos
to
que nos
remember the
ensinam
most evolved spirits who
e o
teach us,
quanto eles
and
nos
how
dizem
often they
que o
tell us
maior,
that
o
the
maior
greatest gift
registro
we
para
can
eles é
that
servir.
for
E eu
them is to
lembro
serve.
de uma mensagem da
And I
Joana
remember
que
a
ela
message from
fala,
Joannes
não me lembro, eu já
from a
tinha
book called
comentado, eu
Jesus
acho,
and Current
que
Days,
fala
in
que
which she
o
says that
serviço
service
e o amor
and love,
devem, o
the
serviço,
service
perdão, e o
and
amor,
love
né, devem então
should
guiar a
guide our
nossa
lives.
vida. Em que a gente aprenda
May we learn
que
that by
servindo se
serving we
ama
love,
e que
and by
serve
loving we serve.
servido.
And I
Fica aqui
send
meu
you
abraço
a hug
a todos e
and my
meu
thank for all of you, and also for Thiago for sharing this moment with me. And if you do not know Guadalupe, you don't know how great it is to have her as a friend. I would like to close in a very poetic way. I would love to read you a poem that was written by a Brazilian poet here in Brazil. That is a song. And I read this poetry song in my father's burial. And it says, "Look at me. It was not by accident that I came to you. And if these streets I survived, and if I have not drowned in these beaches, it's only because I had something to tell you. See in yourself that there is everything you want: courage, hesitation. Love that which makes your hands tremble. Do not let yourself be tackled. The hour is now. Have in me everything you want, everything that lacked in love, and everything you will never have. Come over here. I will give you everything of me, and love will accompany us to the end." And that's it.
Thank you very much, Guadalupe, Thiago, Dan, for that very illuminating study. So I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight, and I wish you all a good evening, and I see you all soon. Thank you very much, and bye for now.